Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crick Vidya podcast series. As things stand, we have just come from a match for the ages. The Sydney draw, in some ways, was more than many victories put together. A rearguard action to savor for ages and reiterate the beauty of Test cricket and life as such. As the final Gaba Test looms, we look forward to the iconic stadium and what lies ahead for India now. To discuss this, we have a very special guest with us, Bharat. And also, along with Bharat, we have leading the discussion will be Manju.
Thanks, Manoj.
Uh, welcome to the podcast, and to our listeners, please do subscribe to our channel and please give our feedback. Manju, over to you.
Yes, and also to the listeners, be available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. So, on that note, I will jump discussion and welcome Bharat. And I would like to start by asking you, what are the elements that make Brisbane such a fortress for the home side?
God, if you go back in time, say turn back the pages, I think it is somewhere in 1988, 89 or something like that, when Malcolm Marshall, Patrick Patterson, Courtney Walsh, and Curtly Ambrose decimated Australia. What you could perhaps see if you go and watch YouTube highlights in the 1980s is from Brisbane, that is perhaps a bit more sideways movement, a little more moisture. That was the time when Kevin Mitchell Sr. was the curator. You can definitely see it with when Richard Hardley took 9 for 52 off of the matter. I think Bruce Reid ran through the Indian side somewhere in 1990. McDermott did it a couple of times in 87, 88, and 91 92 against India. Then Mitchell Jr. took over, his son. So since then, I think we have basically seen tracks with true bounce at Gabba, less moisture. I think that might have played a role. Let's look at say 92-93 test match between Australia and West Indies. Obviously, my memories are vague. I listened to little bit of commentary, that's all. But even Curtly Ambrose, Patterson, was it Walsh and Bishop, they struggled a bit in the first innings. And then the tall pace bowler, Warnie Merkel also struggled a bit in 2012-13 when South Africa played against Australia. So it's tricky to hit. Perhaps visiting fast bowlers find it tricky to hit that typical Australian length, that is around the in-between length and that occasional fullish delivery. That could be one of the reasons why Australia is so good at that venue. Australian fast bowlers obviously are so good at hitting that traditional Australian length. Even if they brought in some Simon Cook or some unknown fast bowler who still hit that particular length. So I think that is one of the key, could be one of the key reasons, and that reason could be Australian batsmen are usually very good at playing horizontal bat shots. It could be any kind of. It needn't be a top class batsman. It even might be an average batsman, Australian batsman, but we have seen Australian batsmen play horizontal bat shots well, and that goes well with true bounce. Since Mitchell Jr., Sandrowski has taken over, and even with Sandrowski, we have seen tracks with similar characteristics, true bounce, not much sideways movement, win the toss, most likely bat first. Obviously, Nazir Hussain and Mahela Jayawardene burned their hands by bowling first. It didn't do anything for England in 2002-3. Other than maybe Simon Jones, who got a little bit of sideways movement before he got injured, that horrible injury. I don't think any other English player got anything out of the track on day one. Obviously, they dropped catches too, and then Mahela Jayawardene tied it with Maruf, Chaminda Vas, and maybe Fernando. That pace attack in 2007-8, mostly medium pace on a track with true bounce. Again, mostly scored 570 or 5 declare or whatever. So that tells you why Australia is sort of so successful at that venue, and it's a kind of ground fast scoring ground. If someone gets on top of the bounce, if someone rides the bounce, it looks like a very easy track. But if someone doesn't do that, if a batsman doesn't do that, it looks like a track from hell. It seems like for a weaver. This could be some of the reasons why Australia is so good at it. Obviously, they now have a kind of aura as well. That because since 1988-89, they haven't lost test.
So, considering how hard fought the series has been so far, do you think the curator may go an extra mile and prepare a more result-oriented wicket, like with more grass?
Usually, Gabba is more as a result-oriented wicket itself, unless you bring in the rain factor. If you go back in time, there's a storm. Storm affected the 1999 Test match between England and Australia. 2003-4 Test match, obviously, we know India Australia that was affected by rain to some extent. I think New Zealand Australia Test match might be 2001-2, that was also affected by rain. But if you do that, maybe a couple of draws, that Alistair Cook's marathon effort alongside Trot and Strauss in 10-11 or 2012, that it was high scoring draw, I think, South Africa Australia. Usually decisive, known as a ground where you get a result. But what I saw in the image was put up on Twitter today, there seemed like a little more grass was left, but you never know, before the toss, the curator Sandusky might trim the grass. So who knows what he would do? But it seemed like there's a little more grass than what I've seen at the Gabba even 25 years. So that might indicate that there might be a little more grass than what we have generally seen at the Gabba or 2 decades.
And considering our depleted seamers, feel that Navdeep Saini, someone like a Navdeep Saini, himself on this wicket, or like how do you see the situation? Because there's a lot of discussion whether he's like Mone Morkel or more floaty. So according to you, what do you feel regarding that?
It's a very tricky pitch. I always felt Gabba is a very sort of tricky pitch for visiting fast bowlers. Like if you hit the traditional Australian length, just around off or just outside off, you hit that great lines, could be good ground for a fast bowler. But if you bowl short and wide, width, we've seen fast bowlers getting absolutely hammered there. So there is one thing a double-edged sword with someone like Saini. You have seen that he doesn't exactly have the greatest of controls. He has space. Yeah, I'm not too sure if someone really hits the deck. Sometimes it sort of comes slowly for him, but definitely he has the pace. But Gabba is a very fast scoring ground, so if you don't exactly bowl with unremitting discipline or control, go for plenty as well. So it's kind of uh, double-edged sword, or you can go either way. You might end up with 0 for 70 in 13, 14 overs and might strike a couple of wickets.
So far, Mohammad Siraj has been quite a revelation in the series. So coming to Gabba, he will be almost assuming the role of the leader of the attack.
Yes.
So do you think he needs to change his plans a bit or his approach, or he should continue in the same mold?
See,
Because without
one point we perhaps saw with Siraj at the MCG was, even with the Indian bowlers, not just Siraj, they tried to zoom it on the stumps, zero it on the stumps. I think that went well with the MCG because sort of track was on the slower side. So Brisbane, obviously, conditions are different in that sense. It is very difficult for this inexperienced pace attack. Nothing against the pace bowlers, they're just so inexperienced. Never, I don't think they have ever played in conditions like the Gabba, where it's completely unfamiliar climbs for them because you have to hit it sort of slightly traditional Australian length. Then instead of going for that slightly perhaps fuller length that someone like Siraj would have been used to in home conditions, or for the match, other inexperienced bowlers, whoever is going to bowl. Shardul Thakur or Natarajan with his left arm. So it's a bit difficult time in that sense, so many injuries. So what the best way to perhaps go about in Australian conditions, whatever, at least at the Gabba, whatever I've seen over 25 years, is to get that in-between length with a new ball, go with that fully still today. I think this Australia-Sri Lanka test 2017-18, you can see the example. Pat Cummins pushed the Sri Lankan batsman back slightly and then went with a slightly fuller length and got the edges, something which Glenn McGrath also used to do during his prime. So I think that's the way to go in these conditions. Maybe slightly shift your line as well, slightly. So just zooming it on the stumps. Once the ball gets hold, you can maybe shift it slightly to outside out. Slightly, that is. So yeah, some adjustments they definitely have to make. I'm pretty sure the coaching staff, Bharatran and company will say that when it comes to execution, you shouldn't expect too much from an inexperienced attack considering they're inexperienced. I think you just should sort of slightly accept the reality in that sense because of so many injuries.
so for one another off spinner, Gabba has pleasant memories where he got a 6-wicket in the 67 series. So to spin tactics, like do you feel spinners will enjoy the bounce or it will be counterproductive? Like we have Ashwin in our ranks who may not fully fit. We have to see how he holds up. So,
Some spinners have, yeah, obviously, Australian spinners have. Nathan Lyon has a good record here. Shane Warne, when someone who could impart both sides spin and over spin. When he's imparted at the Gabba, is usually imparted, I think, more of over spin and has got wickets. Something like Nathan Lyon also does. Ashwin is perhaps slightly different on that sense, slightly different at least compared to Lyon. But yeah, he can do well. He's in good form in this series. Obviously, don't know how his back is holding up. Back spasms. I'm sure you would have uh, better knowledge about it. Back spasms instead of me talking about it. But there's another thing to consider. As far as Prasanna, obviously it came at another time, long time ago. So I'm not too sure how much we can read into it because Australian conditions have definitely changed. It might have, there's no recording of this test. There are only couple of reports you can get.
yeah.
The only the guess you can make is based on the videos that I saw in the 1980s. Perhaps there was a little more moisture or something like that, and if there's moisture, as you know, Shane Warne himself has said spinner also comes into consideration. That might have played a role in Prasanna doing it. Maybe we have to ask him. Someone has to ask him only what really helped him take wickets.
So finally, with this kind of question marks on our bowling attack and team composition, you feel batting first after the toss is a good way to go in case India wins?
This Graba is, as I said, more of a bat first wicket in the recent past. Couple of captains, visiting captains who tried ball first, they definitely burned their hands. So it is something it's advisable to bat first, I think, unless you see too much of grass or something like that. Even then, it is I think a tricky proposition to ball first. And as I said, looking at India's bowling attack, India would definitely I think of bowling first itself. I'm not. I don't think it's a feasible option. I'd be surprised if India don't bowl fast with the Gabba. Even Glenn McGrath said that Gabba is now a bad first wicket and perhaps we have to take his words. Someone who's bowled so much at the Gabba.
So Yasir, you would like to add something?
My one question I just wanted to have was if you have to, what kind of strategy do you think the Indian team can go? I mean, with all the injuries, do you think if given a choice they'll go batting heavy, or will they try to have five bowlers in place as part of the strategy? Because there is some thought process that you bring whatever batsmen you have and let's get seven batsmen including Pant and then decide on the bowling.
I think 11 is Indian 11 is very tricky at the moment to say what exact lineup they could go with or they would go with because there are so many injuries, there are so many pros and cons. What I can say that it looks like some are reporting that Sundar might play just as a stopgap option.
Right.
The other problem is obviously if they go for Kuldeep Yadav, they could be short of batsmen. Then
Right.
they have to hope that Ashwin has to perhaps bat at 7 and then look at so four other bowlers. Kuldeep Yadav also coming into consideration. So it's just a very tricky proposition. It's difficult to say what exact 11 they would go with. Not 100% sure. They might try with a sort of stopgap option. And say, Sundar, what I would definitely say is Gabba tricky conditions for batting as well. So in that sense, India might just go for a sort of slightly safe option and hope that someone like Sundar or someone might come good, especially when you consider the fact that so many bowlers are exhausted as well. That's what I'm hearing as per reports as well. That bowlers are exhausted, that they need someone who can do a sort of holding job as a fifth bowler and do a little bit of batting. So only in that sense they might go with someone like ex stopgap option. But I'm not too sure of Sundar as well because Asim has not played first class cricket since 2017.
Right.
But when you consider that as a safe option, that could be one of the safe options for India. That's to go as a stopgap option of cricketer who can do a bit of this and do a bit of that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so like Sachin has said in a Zoom conversation that when there is a lot of bounce in the wicket, the good length area shrinks. So is it bad for bowlers, like, or is he talking about the visiting bowlers as such, like our attack, or
Good length swings in a sense.
in the sense he was saying if there is a pitch like Gabba, when there is a lot of disconcerting bounce, like there is a lot of bounce, that means the margin there,
Margin
the
of
good
error.
length area, yeah, shrinks for the bowler. So
Yeah,
is like
see, Gabba, as I said, it's a tricky ground, even tricky pitch even for bowlers because you don't get much sideways movement. Like, so if someone hits a good length around that good length area, it doesn't do much. The batsman can still get on top of the bounce and hit it. So it's something that uh, one has to be sort of very precise with the line and length as well. If you give smidgen of width, if you give a little bit of width, the batsman can sort of manufacture own subsidize width and just cut you, especially Australian batsmen are so good at it. So it's something that fast bowlers have, as I said, lots of fast bowlers. Even if you look at say, Catley Ambrose, for the matter, 96, 97 struggled a little bit. Very tall fast bowler. 1993 struggled a bit in the first innings. Only in the second innings he adjusted to the conditions. So this is a tricky, it's proved to be a tricky ground for visiting fast bowlers in the last 27, 28 years. Even for the best.
Bharat, I had one follow-up question to this. We in the first and second test, especially, we were following that middle leg stump strategy, which paid a lot of dividends. Sydney, okay, we were pushed to for multiple overs, but with this new pace attack, bowling attack, do you think, and plus the Gaba pitch under consideration, do you think India can uh, go for that kind of tactic, or they will have to go back to very traditional, conventional lines?
I think mostly they would go with the conventional lines and lengths, but it could be for a particular batsman like Smith or Labuschagne or someone like that. They might still think of having a sort of leg side field just to see what someone like Smith will do. Because this is for a particular batsman. I think, but on an overall basis, I think it would come down to hitting the traditional Australian line, traditional Australian. It's a very little width. Just keep it around in between length. It's the odd occasional foolish delivery. That's what Australian fast bowlers have done. Obviously, when the ball gets old, the Australian fast bowlers also tend to bang it short and see what the batsman will do. Opposition batsman will do. I don't know who if Bumrah isn't playing, I don't know who will take up this role in this Indian side.
so finally, regarding the dimensions of Gabba, it's internationally acclaimed as an Australian rules football ground. So like east, west, north, south, it is at least 170 and 150. So in the fag end of the tour, any implications you feel, or some other strategies while fielding to be adopted?
Not 100% sure on that because I also have watched test matches. I haven't covered test matches by going to the Gabba. So one thing you'll definitely get with Australian grounds with Gabba as well. What I've seen is if you test fielders, boundary line fielders definitely because you test their arms. From there, you have to throw. It's not very easy because uh, these are bigger grounds. Most of them on the Gabba are bigger grounds. I remember, I think it was the 2013-14 Ashes. England played Australia. A few of the batsmen, even at the Gabba, that they were caught hooking or something like that. So, these are bigger grounds. So England or somewhere in India, it might go for a six, but it didn't go for a six. So in that sense, it might really test some of the fielders if you are really exhausted or something like that, it might really test them in that sense.
So, last question of the series pertaining to Australia. That is, after Nathan Lyon's day 5 at Sydney, do you feel there'll be some psychological scars, or he will come to Gabba with a fresh mind because he has a good record here?
But one difference you have to always note that whatever test matches have watched, listened, most of the test matches were like the first test match of series. So in that sense, Nathan Lyon would get into the first test match of series with a lot of confidence in Australian team. Get in with a lot of confidence that we are playing at the Fortress. No one can beat us here. But this is series still. You have to remember, even though India have a very depleted side, I understand. Still the series is on the line. 1-1 it is. And when we think of that fact, Nathan Lyon also at SG didn't exactly go well. Obviously, conditions didn't exactly suit him. His confidence might have taken a little bit of beating at least, if you look at it from an Indian perspective. So in that sense, yeah, but you might say, oh, my record at the Gabba is good. The conditions suit my style of bowling, go spin. But usually, what you would see at the what you would see with Austin Summer is the Gabba test would be the first test. So if you would come out with a lot of confidence, someone like Nathan Lyon here is perhaps not very confident of what happened at the SG test.
So, over to Yasser. If you have any question or closing comments.
Just one question, and then we can conclude this, Bharat. Do you think in the Sydney test, or what do you feel? Because of obviously COVID protocols, the saliva usage has been restricted, right? So, did you feel that that led to reversing not being such a big factor in the Sydney test, especially?
You can say that. You can say generally say that about any test match going around, but right at the fag end of the test match, Mitchell Stark definitely was getting it
Right,
reversed. Obviously, Harry was dropped
right,
by Payne. So, but maybe you can say that the reverse swing in that sense, it was sort of delayed. Maybe after a few more overs, the ball started to uh, move around in the air. But right at the fag end of the display, Stark was getting a little bit of reverse. On day 4, I think Cummins was getting a little bit of reverse swing. Day 5 as well, just a hint.
right.
But yeah, we might have a point that if there was this usage of saliva, then we might have seen reverse swing slightly earlier than
Right.
what we got to see.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you, Bharat. Thank you so much for previewing the next test, which is, I think, going to be critical. And thank you, Manju, as well, for leading this discussion. And we hopefully we'll see another fight as we have seen from Indians throughout the series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.